Hello and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on today's show is Chief Mike Johnson. He's the chief of the Ebbets Pass Fire District. Chief, welcome to the program.
Hey, good evening, Joel, and thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm really glad to have you on. We have some important things to talk about, namely Measure A, and so I was hoping you could give our viewers a brief overview of what Measure A is to get us started.
Absolutely, and once again, thank you for this opportunity to give some factual information out there about a tax measure that's going to be on the May 7th, 2019 mail-in ballot in our district area. So recently, our board has approved a tax measure to be put forth to our community, and it's really pinpointed towards the sustainability of our advanced life support program and even adding an additional firefighter or paramedic to each of our 3 shifts.
So basically, if this does go through, it's going to preserve the services upon which people rely and also even add to those services. And we're going to get into a lot of detail about the importance of this measure and get the facts and education out to our viewers. Before we really delve into Measure A, though, I wanted people to know a little bit about Ebbets Pass Fire. So where are you guys located, first of all?
Well, if you've been to Murphy's, of course, we're not quite encompassing that area, but as soon as you start climbing that grade, up Utica grade and the curves there, you enter into the Ebbets Pass Fire District. And it really continues all the way, Joel, to the Alpine County line, or Alpine Calaveras County line. And we have about 225 square miles that we service in that area.
So a monster area and lots of driving to get from back to all the areas. So like if you get called out, you guys may have to drive a long way to get to certain people. Certainly,
yeah, it can be very vast. And as you well know, there's a lot of recreationalists that like to come to the area. And so they may be enjoying a wilderness experience when, they need that 911 service, and we respond to them too.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting. Some people think of a fire department as, well, they just put fires out, right? But there's so much more that Ebbets Pass Fire does. Can you share some of the other emergency and non-emergency services that you offer?
Absolutely, that'd be a pleasure. I want to tell you that Ebbets Pass Fire District is a true all-risk fire department or fire district, meaning that we respond to fires like you typically would imagine. And by today's standards, every fire agency responds to medical calls as well. Although Ebbets Pass is the ambulance service for our area as well, so we have those paramedics that are out there to provide that top-level advanced life support services to those folks. We also do swift water and even ice rescue as well, because we have the Stanislaus River, and of course this time of year when those bodies of water are iced over, sometimes people need rescuing from that as well.
And then when you come into like the facility that you have a multi-purpose room that I know a lot of community members meet in. Do you offer any kind of training programs or community educational programs there?
Yes, we do. We do have CPR offered multiple times through the year, first aid offered multiple times through the year, and really, upon request, we do our best to try to accommodate outside groups to come in and provide other types of training. And really, we're public servants through and through, and our facility is a public gathering place for the community, and we're proud of that. And we're there to do the best we can to serve those folks that keep us up there and doing that work.
What is the staff number right now of firefighters on staff?
Well, we have 7 people working each and every day on a 24-hour shift, and that really staffs 2 ambulances, 1 fire engine, and a supervisor each and every day.
And these ambulances have paramedics on them, and the fire engine also has paramedics on it?
That's correct, Joel.
Is that rare among foothill agencies like this?
In a rural service model, I find that it is rare, and it seems like a point that people really need to digest is the farther you are away from a medical facility such as an emergency room, the more important it is that the first responders have that highest level, or paramedicine level if you can, service right there closest to where the incident may occur, and that reduces the time that it takes to get you to the emergency room, and we call that the golden hour, the magic 60 minutes. So we have 35 miles one way to the emergency room, and by a rural road, as you well know, that takes a while. It's not 35 minutes. It takes a little bit longer than that to get to an emergency room. So if we can get to you quickly and get you to that emergency room within that 1 hour, the golden hour, it's the best possible service as far as that medical call for those people that need it.
But the key there is that if you have those advanced level paramedics, you're getting amazing care en route and when you first get picked up, as opposed to maybe just getting transported and then the hospital giving you that high level of care.
Right, so the paramedicine is the highest street medicine that you're going to find out there as a standard. So what you get with that is an intervention level that's the highest that we can possibly offer our community and the people that visit there. And it's the better outcome anytime you can get that highest level of intervention at the quickest possible time. So low response times and best possible care.
So you don't only respond to the house fires, are you also responding to wildfires that start in the area?
Absolutely. We are working hand in hand with our CAL FIRE and Forest Service partners. In those types of situations where you have a wildfire start in a rural community like ours, it's not about the jurisdictional importance as it is the suppression of the fire and keeping them small. So we leverage even our ambulance attendants, our firefighters, and they're out there fighting those blazes as well.
So when you look at a community like Paradise that recently had a fire start and just devastate the entire community, you know, it could happen up in Arnold in a number of different areas because we have similar topography and vegetation up there. But in order to stop that from happening, the more responders that we have, CAL FIRE, Ebbets Pass Fire, and others to go and get on those fires early is absolutely critical. So have you ever come across fires that started in a really precarious area and just like, wow, I'm so glad we got that out before it turned into a catastrophe?
I remember one call specifically just this last summer in the middle of fire season, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I believe it was over 90 degrees, and we had a fire start down at the Avery area, and it impacted the traffic flow on Highway 4, and we leveraged literally everything that we had, 2 ambulances, a fire engine, our supervisor that day. Of course, CAL FIRE was there, and they were there in force. Mutual aid system allowed the Murphy's Fire District to assist and come up. I was there. So literally every capable firefighter that was qualified to be there was, and I believe it was a great show of having all the resources you could possibly leverage to that call. I would not want to see service levels diminish in any way each and every day, so we can try to keep fires as small as possible.
And that Avery fire was right on the rim of the Stanislaus Canyon, and we all know if a fire gets down into the Stanislaus Canyon, it could come up into any of those neighborhoods in Arnold, Big Trees Village, Camp Connell, if it got big enough, and that could be really devastating.
Right.
So Ebbets Pass Fire has been around for many years. When roughly did it get started?
1965, and it was put into place to bridge the gap when there wasn't a wildfire suppression group, and like it was CDF back then, that wasn't there. So they saw a need, and so when they were vacant, then they decided that they were going to establish the Ebbets Pass Fire District in 1965.
So it was established then, and then through the years, I imagine that there was maybe more need and it grew a little bit, and then eventually the Ebbets Pass Fire was able to build a beautiful headquarters that really expanded the capabilities. When did that happen, roughly?
That building was built in 2007, and the service model had grew sometime before that. About a decade before, there was a identified gap in service when it came to some of the long ambulance times back in the 90s. The agency decided that they were going to do a pilot program and have an ambulance follow the engine in those rare situations where they didn't have an ambulance to transport somebody, and they ventured in a slightly different direction for the 90s for sure.
So let's dig into that a little bit. So before ambulances were available through Ebbets Pass Fire, where were they be coming from to go help people in your area?
Well, if I understand my history lessons correctly, and I am a student, I didn't experience it, I wasn't there at the time, that there was a couple of providers, and depending on the loads and service areas that they were also working, there may or may not be an ambulance in that particular area, and therefore, as a fire agency, we weren't always aware if we were going to wait a long time or a short time, but we were willing to put a couple of folks on an ambulance and get the proper certification if we needed to transport a community member ourselves.
And without that service, an ambulance from another company could have been coming from Angels Camp or San Andreas or somewhere that's quite a ways away?
Yeah, or maybe even further.
Maybe even further.
Yeah.
So the idea was the community wanted to have ambulance services right in its own backyard so you could minimize those response times to get help really quickly.
That's right.
Got it. So how was that funded? How did that work?
Well, back in 1998, the district had put together a tax measure at that point, and it was for the paramedic fire engine. And it was the funding to put one paramedic on that fire engine, and that's essentially what got the agency into the game of advanced life support. And in 2004, they did something very similar, and they actually did an ambulance program, a tax measure then. Both programs were built as a flat tax measure. So the $1998 and the $2004 was a program that they were putting out there, and eventually the programs became underfunded. The ambulance program and the paramedic program was a great success. As a matter of fact, the ambulance program was built around the premise that if you're a resident, or essentially you're paying into that tax measure, that you don't pay anything out of pocket, which was a huge benefit to the community. So now the community not only gets quick response, they get that golden hour to the emergency room, but they're not having an out-of-pocket expense, which relieves a lot of stress, especially we know how expensive medical bills can be nowadays.
No doubt. And I mean, ambulance rides, gosh, how expensive is an ambulance ride these days?
For an extended mileage like we're talking about, 35 miles, and that's to the Arnold area, and we go much farther up the hill. Ambulance rides can be as expensive as $5,000 depending on the types of interventions that are being done. And if you have insurance like I do, you know that it's not 100% pay on their part. So you're on the hook for some of it. Sometimes you're on the hook for a lot of it. But if you're a resident in Ebbets Pass, there's no out-of-pocket expense. We take the insurance payment as 100% payment in full.
So even if your insurance only covered $1,000 of that $5,000 bill, you're covered in full as a resident. So that also seems like it's kind of a rare benefit for ambulance services.
It is, and it's not limited to how many rides you would need in a year or have in a year. Our motto is, if you don't need our services at all, that's a great year for you, okay? And if you need us once, twice, for whatever family member in your household, there's no out-of-pocket expense. As a matter of fact, we're really proud to say that in 2017, we saved the community $1.1 million in out-of-pocket expense that typically would have been passed on to those without a program like this.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. Does that also help out with deductibles if you do get a ride and then you don't have to pay anything, but can you actually apply what the Ebbets Pass Fire District charges to a deductible? Or?
In some medical insurance structures, they'll view the unpaid amount that is considered to be paid because you're part of this program as a payment that would go towards your annual deductible. So that could also be a benefit, although as far as the insurance industry goes, I don't think that's a standard across the board, but it's definitely something to look into if you're in our area and you happen to use our services.
So what kind of payment to the fire district have people been accustomed to from those two tax measures in order to have these services in the past?
The total amount that we have collect out of those is $1.1 million is the amount that those two programs bring in. And in 1998 and in 2004, that definitely covered the operational costs. But just a quick comparison, if you look back in what the minimum wage was when 2004 is $5.50, and now we're in some places it's it's over $12, and a gallon of diesel was $1.67, and it was that was a real height back in 2004, and now we're nearing $4 a gallon. So if you just look at a couple of comparisons like that, you'll see how while the revenue from those two tax measures to operate those two programs, it was always known that at some point they were going to be underfunded. And we have leveraged all the resources in the district to make sure we could underwrite those programs before having to go out to another tax measure. We feel like our our customer, our supporters, this is our community's programs, and the last thing we wanted to do is come to them with another tax measure until the time was necessary. And that time is now, Joel. And as we look forward, we know that we'll no longer be able to leverage anything else to keep from reducing services. So as of July 1, I don't want to look at it too bleakly, although the fact is we'll have to start reducing our 2 ambulance model down to 1 ambulance periodically initially in July 1 of 2019, and then more as we go along if a tax measure funding doesn't come through. And as a fire chief, that's the last thing I want to do is a reduction in service for our community. And, that's why we want to share these facts with these people today.
And when you think about 2 ambulances being available versus 1, you just think about there must be a lot of times when there are 2 people who need your help at the same time. And so if you only had 1, then you'd have to go to 1 and then someone else is waiting. So that must be tough. Do you, just roughly back of the napkin, do you have a lot of times when those ambulances are both out and about?
We do. We've analyzed a lot of our own data, and we really scrutinized 2017 at the time when we were putting together some ideas. That was the data set available. And we ran 1,077 calls total. And out of that 1,077, 140 of them we had 2 medical calls at the same time. Wow. So that's over, roughly 13% or so of the call volume was using 2 ambulances at the same time. So that piece right there showed us that that's a big percentage that we would be waiting an extended amount of time for the mutual aid system to send us up another ambulance.
Now, would there ever be a need to have 3 ambulances? Does that ever happen, or does the 2 mainly handle it?
Well, 33 times there was a 3rd ground transport call that we used the mutual aid system during that same time frame. So essentially, when we talk about what benefits this tax measure could provide for us, and we talked about that 1 paramedic firefighter for each shift, we would potentially be able to have that person be in place and ready to staff a 3rd ambulance with if we brought on another partner for them. And that could be a real asset to us to quickly turn around, or even planned high traffic weekends such as the 4th of July, or maybe when people are coming up to enjoy like a holiday weekend up in the snow. We could put up another ambulance and have 3 in those times as planned, budgeted with that extra paramedic.
Yeah, so that would be a huge benefit, because those 33 times, then you'd be able to have the extra ambulance available and people wouldn't have to be waiting. So, okay. But this all hangs in the balance depending on the tax measure, because you can go in 2 directions. You either are going to have the same level and more service with ambulances, or you may actually go down and only have 1 sometimes, which means then you have more people who are waiting to get transported for longer periods of time.
Right.
Okay. Wow. So tell me about the lead up. So we have budget challenges because these tax measures that passed in 98 and 2004, fixed amounts, cost of doing business goes up, everything you're buying goes up. I'm sure a lot of costs are going up, just like any business. When did you say, okay, we've exhausted all other opportunities, we got to do a tax measure, and who was involved in making that decision?
Well, we certainly... we appreciate an inclusive approach to most all problems in our fire district, and certainly this one is no different. We have a 5-person elected board that I work for and answer to, besides the community, of course. And we have a unionized local workforce, and then we also have a volunteer staff, and of course the community. And we started out with a small focus group and laid out a roadmap, if you will, to analyze what we had been doing, and made sure that we were, if we had to go this direction, that it was absolutely necessary. And we included a expanded focus group of the community to come in and work with us. And that really was kind of the basis of a kind of a steering mechanism for where we were going to go to next. And ultimately that ended up being a town hall meeting, which we disseminated a survey, and put together a full spectrum of options, if you will, and kind of like a menu, and wanted to get input. So part of that input was obviously we tried to cover the full spectrum, and one was do nothing and accept less service, which it's not what I would be signing on for, right? But we put it on there, all the way to even opening up an additional fire station. Along with that, we wanted to know if there was any desire to have an annual increase. And if we did, would that be sunsetted at any time so we wouldn't be in this same boat in the future? It made sense to get the programs off to a good start this way, although sustainability is critical for the community to know these programs will continue on into the future. So we took all that data set and we created exactly where we felt all that survey information was pointing to, and that was how we ended up with that model and of having sustainability for the advanced life support and one firefighter paramedic per shift. And what I haven't mentioned is there's a flat annual increase of $6.23 per year for 10 years, and then it sunsets. So if approved, the citizens would know that there's a flat fee that's not based off of an annual percentage, which is kind of hard to figure sometimes. And so that was the data set that we collected, and we really just wanted to collect the intent of what the community wanted for itself. And hopefully we hit the mark for them, and hopefully they're getting exactly what they put down on that survey.
And that town hall was well attended, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't do a collection of, a counter or anything like that, but we definitely had a couple hundred people there.
You filled up the Independence Hall pretty well there.
And I noticed some of the people at the beginning were different at the end, so we had a rotation in there. And we had some people come by the fire station too and ask for the survey form because they had other engagements that particular evening. And great community interaction, and we've enjoyed that kind of interaction with our community, so that's really no surprise. And we really just wanted to collect the information from them and see what they wanted for themselves. So we really wanted to be a mechanism for the community to put a measure on the ballot that not only that they would support, but that they chose, at least with a sampling with the survey.
And it's not an easy bar to pass when it comes to passing a measure like this. How many, or what percentage do you have to surpass?
Yes, it's 66.67% is what you need to pass it, which that's a staggering percentage.
Yeah.
And we've seen recent tax measures fail within a couple of points and a couple of percentage of going out there for their critical funding. And we're here to articulate all the facts and get the facts out there. We also have a Firefighters Association, and our local Firefighters Union 3581 it will be working and getting the message out there and doing some work like that too. So we're trying to do our best to do good education and reach out through those methods.
And I know as the chief, you're not able to come out in favor or oppose. You're here to educate and inform. But how does the Firefighters Union feel, or the association, because they are able to take a position?
I'll go as far as to say they're in full support of the tax measure, and we're a unified front. And as cliche as it may sound, we're really a tight-knit family, and most of our members are all community members as well, including myself. So when we're talking about these things, you not only do you get to work on one side of it, it's also, you're asking that of yourself. You're asking that of your family. And I think that's powerful. And so I feel like all those things went into building this tax measure. And if it has success, then some of it is due to those things as well.
So everyone's going to want to know, what is this going to cost me? So let's break that down for empty lots and also lots that have been improved. How is that going to work?
All right. So if you have an improved lot, which is a lot with a home on it, that's going to be $134 annually.
Okay.
So that's the increase. We have $128 currently on the tax roll now, and that's the original programs that we talked about in 1998 and 2004. So another $134, which brings your grand total up to $262. And you may ask yourself, well, how does that compare to some other places? And we ask people, make sure when you look at those things, if you're paying any kind of measure or additional fees for your fire service, look at the ambulance service too, because that's really where the piece is. So a lot of ambulance service will offer no out-of-pocket expense at a membership fee, and you add those together, and I think that you'll see where our group is right there with those numbers. And one thing I do want to mention is a benefit to having the ambulance have firefighters run it is our suppression rating went up significantly to an ISO Class 2, and that's the insurance office. And what that's done is for the insurance, the homeowner's insurance, they use that particular rating, we've actually been able to lower some of the homeowner's insurance as well. So that's really important, especially in these times with wildfire threat.
No doubt. So a lot of information that people can find out from listening to you today, but they could also go to the website or contact. What are some ways they could get a hold of you or find more information?
Certainly, we can be found on Facebook, also directly to our website at EPFD.org. And also a direct phone line number is 209-795-1646.
So just to leave people with some information, they're going to receive this in the mail about what time?
I would imagine they're going to be seeing it sometime in April.
And they'll need to make a decision, yes or no, and then mail that back into the county by what date?
May 7th.
May 7th. And there'll be outreach from you, but also the Firefighters Association between now and the May 7th date, right?
Look for those things from the association and from Local 3581.
And if anyone has detailed questions, you're available anytime. Yeah. Just let you know, and you can make sure people have all their questions answered.
We would love to hear from them.
Okay, well, Chief, thank you for your time. Thanks for talking over this measure and educating everyone about it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel.
And I appreciate you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I hope you join me next time.